We built a world where connectivity is constant. But the more plugged in he became, the emptier the silence inside him felt. The algorithm fed his mind a daily dose of comparison, a quiet poison that made his real, messy life feel completely invisible. He was surrounded by hyper-innovation, deadlines, and metrics, yet he was dying of thirst in an ocean of data. At some point, convenience stopped being helpful. It became a cage of invisible walls that tracked his every breath. The only way to save his mind was to completely unplug the machine before the machine completely hollowed him out. He decided to take the ultimate American gamble, a total digital exile. No screens, no signal, no escape routes. He arrived in Alaska, a land that doesn't care about your follower count, your career metrics, or your digital identity. As the sound of the engine faded into the mountains, the absolute weight of true, unmapped silence hit him for the first time. When you remove the artificial noise of the world, your brain panics at the silence. Every breath sounds too loud. It wasn't a luxury retreat. It was a basic shelter of rotting wood and stone, a place where survival would require absolute focus. The first night was an interrogation by his own mind. Without a screen to distract him, every buried anxiety came out of the shadows. The phantom itch of the phone was a physical addiction. His brain was starving for the cheap dopamine loops it had been fed for years. But the morning brought a different kind of reality. Out here, if you don't gather firewood, you freeze. He spent his days doing physical labor that left no room for overthinking. Chop wood, stack it, repeat until your hands ache. He stopped consuming data and started observing nature. He learned the rhythm of the river, the behavior of the wind, and the true value of clean water. Failure in the wilderness doesn't come with an edit button or a delete option. You just stay in the cold until you figure out how to build the flame. The small fire felt like a massive victory. It was a tangible piece of comfort created entirely by his own two hands, without an app. He watched life happen in real time, without a filter, without a comment section. It was majestic, slow, and he stopped trying to control his environment. He allowed himself to get wet, to get cold, and to realize that he could survive the discomfort. When you write by hand, your thoughts slow down to match the speed of the ink. You start saying things that are actually true. Winter came early, locking him inside his wooden fortress. The world outside was completely white out. The digital addiction was finally dead. He no longer felt the phantom buzz in his pocket. He was finally completely present in his own skin. He began to prefer things that were heavy, rough, and real over things that were smooth, digital, and fleeting. You find a different kind of kinship out here. You are just another creature trying to make it through the winter. No better, no worse. Every meal became a ceremony of appreciation. When you have to work for every calorie, nothing is ever taken for granted again. He stood there, a tiny dot in a massive frozen wilderness, and for the first time in his life, he didn't feel invisible. Spring returned, and with it, a new clarity. The wilderness had done its job. He wasn't returning as a broken man seeking an escape. He was returning as an anchor, someone who carried an unshakable silence inside. He left the mountains behind, but he knew the mountains would never leave him. The contract with the real world had been signed. The city was exactly the same, loud, distracted, and moving at a frantic speed. But he was completely different. He turned the device back on, not as a master to serve, but simply as a tool to use. The algorithm no longer owned his attention. With a few quiet clicks, he closed the digital circus forever. Opting out of the infinite loop of noise that had almost destroyed him, he created a strict boundary, a sanctuary of real-world practices inside his digital life, ensuring the screen would never bleed into his soul again. He traded his digital connections for real community. He found that true belonging is built in the shared sweat of human hands working the earth together. You know, these little moments make all the difference. Absolutely. I've been feeling that too. Yes. He began teaching others how to look up from their screens, how to observe the shape of a leaf, the texture of bark. The modern world didn't feel like a prison anymore, because he had built a key inside his own mind and the ability to find stillness anywhere. He gave people his absolute, undivided attention, treating presence as the rarest and most valuable gift. The digital ocean was still roaring outside. But inside his room, he redirected his technical skills toward protecting the real world, using the digital tools to rebuild the physical landscapes that had saved his life. Every weekend became a return to the roots, a conscious choice to step out of the signal and remind himself who he was without the numbers. He learned to trust the physical steps he took, grounding his life in things that had weight, friction, and real-world consequences. He found a perfect balance, working in the city but belonging to the earth, living in the modern world without letting the modern world consume his soul. The path wasn't crowded, and it didn't come with a status update, but every step felt entirely real, entirely meaningful, and entirely his own. He wrote down his final conclusion. The world is not found on a glass screen. It is found in the dirt, the wind. He had survived the great digital fever. He had faced the blank emptiness of the wilderness, and he had come back whole. His home was no longer a network of wires and algorithms. It was a space of quiet memories, a physical reflection. He didn't need a machine to tell him how he slept or how he lived. He just trusted the natural rhythm of a mind that had finally found its home. Don't let the noise of a digital. The next generation was drowning in the same digital swamp, and they needed a lifeline. He didn't lecture them about technology being evil. He just showed them what they were missing, the raw, unedited majesty of a world that doesn't need a charge. For the first time in years, the spell of the screen was broken for someone else. A single spark of curiosity was lit in a young mind. Keep these notebooks close. They hold your potential.
Thank you so much. You've really inspired me.
Now, go write your story. Slowly, the project grew into a movement. Across the city, small pocket groups of young people started forming packs. He had built a physical network of healing, turning his old engineering skills away from virtual code and toward real-world community architecture. Wow, that's amazing work!
Thank you.
High five!
Yeah.
He became a voice of balance in a culture of excess, a living proof that you can work with technology without letting it dictate the terms of your humanity. He knew the digital traps would only become more sophisticated, more alluring, and more invasive. He had reclaimed his time. He had reclaimed his attention. He had reclaimed the basic sovereignty of his own human soul. Every single week, he returned to the boundary of the earth. He learned to love the limits. He learned to love the friction. He found that true freedom doesn't exist in an infinite feed. The story of his survival was no longer a secret battle. It was a shared path that anyone could follow, if they just had the courage to turn off the screen. The machine will always try to tell you who you are, what you need, and what you lack. He had won the war for his own mind. He was no longer a ghost in the machine. He was a man. The road ahead was clear. There were no digital notifications to guide him, no algorithms to predict his choices. He built a life that didn't need to be validated by likes, shares, or metrics. A life where the highest reward. The book of his old anxieties was permanently shut. The blank page of his future was waiting. Don't let the digital world replace the real masterpiece of your existence. Look up from the glass, breathe the cold.